Welcome back. I'm your host, Ella.
I'm Niiler.
Caitlin.
I'm Anna.
And welcome to
Colon Continent Conversations. Oh wait.
Today we talk about the Industrial Revolution. Picture this. It's the early 1800s, metal is expensive, construction is slow, and your average bridge can't go up your mama. The introduction of the Bessemer process was a cheat system for making steel faster, cheaper, and stronger. People could travel farther distances at affordable rates. Infrastructure boomed and jobs increased in cities. Farmers were able to move out of their sad jobs and become big dogs.
Not really though, because they still worked in dangerous conditions.
Chemical industries also played a major role. Crop yields skyrocketed, and with the increase of chemical fertilizers, food was produced faster and could be sold for cheaper.
And more food meant bigger populations.
True. Then there's the textile industry. Thanks to aniline chemicals, vibrant dyes became mass-produced, making colorful clothing accessible to all, not just the rich folks.
So you're saying it was the birth of fast fashion?
Yeah, pretty much. And beyond clothes, chemical revolutionized medicine and hygiene. We're talking aspirin, penicillin, soap, and detergents, all of which made life healthier and cleaner, which we all know they needed.
Goodbye, plagues. Hello, longer life expectancy.
Yes.
It's also significant because if steel built the cities and chemicals kept people alive, electricity made life actually livable. Edison swooped in with the incandescent light bulb, and people could see and operate at night. Urban safety was also increased because streetlights made streets safer. Factories could also run for longer hours, which wasn't good for the workers, but it was definitely needed.
I know the capitalists loved this. They were so greedy.
Speaking of journeys, the advancement of communication affected all migration throughout the 19th century.
The Uber of the industrial age without the crazy prices.
Moving became an affordable, efficient option for many people. They were able to flock to cities and find jobs and move their families around as well. The Transcontinental Railroad was a fancy infrastructure project along with the first version of westward expansion. Americans were able to move to new territories at faster speeds and take multiple people with them. Immigrants were also able to hop on trains. They took the American dream to heart and flocked straight there. European immigrants could settle in New York and take jobs in the Midwest because of the improved transportation. Steamships as well fostered migration.
So it was like the OG cruise ship?
Yeah, pretty much. Before the introduction of steamships, many of the wind-powered boats were pretty much vulnerable to all storms, and passengers got seasick a lot. More passengers could be seated, which increased migration worldwide. They were also able to travel safer because the ships could navigate rivers and canals, reducing the risk of shipwrecks.
So what did this do?
It encouraged people to travel because they were able to do so in an organized manner. Many migrants who moved for work could return home easily. This was common for Italian and Chinese laborers who worked in the Americas but maintained connections to their homelands. With all these new advancements, people had traveling inventions and they were able to go with the launch of the telegraph. Before, if you wanted to send a letter back home, it might take weeks.
Just how long it takes me to get a text back. I mean,
I'm on delivered for 10 hours now.
no, that's right.
Dang, girl. Anyway, the telegraph brought instant updates. Families getting real-time news about migration opportunities, job openings, or even a simple checkup. Businesses also got into action. Railroad companies literally advertised land grant to European farmers via telegraph. Imagine getting a message that says, "Come to America, free land available." That's basically a historical version of a job posting. Businesses could operate internationally, meaning workers had more choices than ever.
Alright guys, let's play a little game. I'll give $20 to whoever can guess who was more successful at industrialization. Russia or US?
Russia.
Russia, US? Okay guys, stay tuned. Because Russia was being controlled by a Tsar, an oppressive monarchy, they industrialized late. Also, Russia had a strict social hierarchy with no room for social mobility. The reason why Russia did not want to industrialize was due to serfdom. Cheap legal labor, also rich aristocrats weren't eager for change.
Yikes. It must have sucked watching everyone else industrialize.
I know, right? This was such a drastic difference from the US. They were thriving, guys, okay? Samuel Slater smuggled British manufacturing secrets to America and then boom, the first textile factory, the U.S. government actually helped industrialization with land.
Okay, elaborate.
Okay, they had land grants for railroads, a big budget for building things like factories and infrastructure, and tariffs to protect American industries and infrastructure like canals. Russia, not so much.
Russia need to catch the fuck up.
Exactly. Okay. Russia industrialized to catch up with Europe and strengthen its military. The U.S., it was all about capitalism. Fun fact, by this time, U.S. was producing 36% of the world's manufactured goods.
Wow.
Let's talk workers now. Conditions sucked in both countries, don't get me wrong now, okay? Long hours, terrible pay, and unsafe factories. But in Russia, there were no political organizations, no unions, and no way to fight back. So they protested, okay? It was total chaos, okay? In the US, workers can unionize. While the fight was tough, they eventually won shorter workdays and better conditions. That's why we have weekends, guys.
Yes.
So, consequences in Russia, more factory jobs, but also famine, overcrowding, and suffering. In the U.S., global economic superpower USA, baby! But also pollution, overcrowding, and health issues, but we don't talk about that. And now for the big reveal, drum roll, please, everybody. In the United States, industrialization efforts can be considered highly successful. Russia, not so much. Too much state control, too late in the game, making their efforts not very successful. Okay, now, we have talked about Russia and the U.S., and now let's talk about the Latin American Revolution. It was certainly something.
What do you mean by that?
I'll be upfront. The Latin American Industrial Revolution flopped. Let me explain why. First and foremost, exports. Latin America had a ton of them. Coffee from Brazil, from Mexico, you name it, okay? In fact, 44% of their goods were exported.
Okay, but why is that bad though?
Okay, because relying on exports discouraged domestic industrialization. Most of the profits went to the elites, while the lower class, the majority of the population, saw little benefit. Then there was a mess of political instability. After gaining independence from Spain and Latin America was plagued with civil wars and weak governments. Mexico alone had Santa Anna's president for more than 9 times in the span of 22 years. That's terrible. Bolivia had 10 constitutions, and Ecuador and Peru had 8. It was bad, okay?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Dang.
And finally, no manufacturing, no industrialization. Latin America did not invest in new technology or factories, and with a poor population and reliance on exports, there was no real market for the industry to grow.
So they really never had a chance.
I mean, yeah, basically. Some countries like Argentina and Brazil made efforts later, but overall, Latin America lagged behind Europe and the US, and even today, many economies still depend on raw material exports instead of manufacturing. Overall, it was little effort and little success. Don't know what to tell you.
They sucked.
Dang, that really sucked. And I mean, moving on to some countries that were a little more successful in their industrialization, if you've ever wondered why we have things like labor laws, minimum wage, Social Security, you can thank socialism. But to understand how it came about, we have to look at the Industrial Revolution and the growth of capitalism. Picture this. It's the 1800s, cities are booming, factories are popping up everywhere, and industry and an increasingly capitalistic society is making some people very rich. Sound familiar? But not everyone is benefiting. Factory workers who are keeping everything running are dealing with crazy long hours, dangerous conditions, and barely enough pay to survive. Meanwhile, the factory owners and business elites are living in absolute luxury, while their workers are packed into cramped, dirty tenements. The gap between the rich and the poor is getting bigger by the day. People start realizing, wait a minute, this system isn't working for the majority. And that's when socialist ideas began to take shape. Thinkers like Karl Marx start arguing that capitalism is unfair and workers should have more control over wealth and resources.
Right, and this leads to 2 different approaches. Some socialists wanted gradual reforms, meaning they want to push for laws and policies to make things fairer. Others, like more radical revolutionaries, believe that capitalism is to be completely overthrown.
Yeah, right. These ideas quickly spread across Europe. In Britain, for example, workers even formed their own party, the Labour Party, to fight for better conditions through elections. And you have More extreme movements like communism, which took things even further. Instead of just improving capitalism, communists wanted to replace it entirely with a system where the government controlled everything.
But whether they were moderate or radical, socialist movements have one big thing in common. They were fighting for workers' rights.
Exactly.
Period.
People started using labor unions, going on strike, demanding better wages. Their biggest victory was the right to vote. That was huge. Once the working class had political power, they could elect leaders who actually cared about their needs. And that's when we started seeing major changes. Higher wages, safer working conditions, even things like public parks and schools that would have been unheard of before. So taking a look at the big picture, socialism didn't just pop up randomly. It was a response to the failures of capitalism. When businesses left unchecked, they prioritized profits over people and workers suffered. So we can thank socialism for a lot of the comforts we enjoy today.
Thank you,
Thank you,
socialism.
Yes, thank you, socialism.
We're going to be exploring how the two big empires, Ottomans and the King, reacted to the European industrialization.
So, Naya, what happened when Europe kicked off the Industrial Revolution?
When Europe started using new technologies, everything changed, both in making products and fighting wars. Even though the Ottomans and the King weren't industrialized like Europe, they started noticing
What exactly did they notice?
Ottoman leaders saw that the European nations were producing goods much faster and cheaper. They worried that their traditional industries and armies might not keep up. The early exposure of the European products made China realize that the industrial production was becoming super important and big challenges were ahead.
I see. How did this pressure get them to change?
As Europe advanced, both empires felt strong pressure to modernize. In China, the First Opium War from 1839 to 1842 forced them to sign the Treaty of Nanking. This treaty opened Chinese ports to European trade, ceded territory, and gave extra rights to foreign merchants.
And what about the Ottomans?
The Ottomans didn't face war like the Opium Wars, but European factories made goods begin to flood their markets, hurting local artisans and small industries. This economic pressure made it clear that reform was needed.
So how did each empire try to reform their military and government?
The Ottoman launched the Tanzimat reforms. They modernized their army with new training and modern weapons, and they reformed their bureaucracy and legal systems to schools learning Western technology. But traditional Confucian elites resisted these changes.
Did their efforts succeed?
Well, both empires had mixed results. In the late 1800s, the Ottomans invested in railroads, telegraph lines, and factories. But financial issues and political instability meant they could only partially catch up to Europe. Similarly, the king built state-run factories and modern shipyards to reduce European dependence, but corruption and conservative pushback slowed down progress.
What were the long-term effects of the reforms?
For the Ottomans, the Tanzimat reforms led to some modernization. These changes laid the groundwork for future movements like the Young Turk Revolution. In China, limited success of the self-strengthening movement fueled the internal strife and diminished faith in traditional leadership, paving the way for the 1911 revolution.
That really shows how industrialization reshaped empires and set stage for modern nations.
Exactly. Thanks for joining our quick history chat.